Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar featuring guest presenter Tammie Van Buren, the Compliance Manager at the Safe Quality Food Institute. Please note that all attendees are going to be muted throughout the duration of today's webinar. If you have any questions for the presenter or for PJRFSI, we encourage you to use the designated question tab within your GoToWebinar control panel. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tammie. So thank you for joining us today.
Hello and welcome to the webinar, and I'm so glad that you all are here. I've got Chris Reno with me as well. I'm going to let Chris introduce himself first, and then I'll jump into the presentation for you.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Tammie. So my name is Chris Reno. I'm one of the business development managers here at Perry Johnson Food Safety. Been in the industry now for right at 10 years, celebrating my 10th year this year. So started off in operations, much like a lot of folks on the call today, and transitioned into food safety about 10 years ago. So always been a big supporter of the SQF Institute, and Tammie is a provider, presenter for our webinars today. Really excited to have you on. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to jump off and I'll come back in at the end of today's presentation for any questions that might jump up.
Sounds like a plan. So I am going to also turn off my camera so that you all can focus on the presentation. And then again, like Chris, I'll jump back on at the very end and we will entertain any questions that you might have. All right, so here my face on the screen, just to tell you a little bit about myself. I have more than 25 years of experience in quality control, about 7 years in the food industry. Actually, I think I've added a few years since then. 7 years was my time as an SQF practitioner. I've been with SQF now for almost 5 years, so the time has kind of flown by for sure. Again, I'm currently the compliance manager at SQFI, and I'm responsible for the compliance and integrity program. We analyze a lot of data and statistics, as well as seeing that our certified sites, our auditors, and our certification bodies are adhering to the requirements of the SQF code. A little bit of education there. I have a master's in science and engineering technology, as well as a bachelor's in math. So I am a numbers person, and give me your data. I love a good data set. Okay. All right, so today we are talking specifically about the top non-conformances for food packaging facilities. And, a lot of times we'll see a little bit of difference between food facilities and food packaging facilities. There are some things that are different in the codes, but there are a lot of things that are the same as well. So you'll see some similarities between this top list versus what you would see for food manufacturing. But the number one non-conformance minors is for gaps under, around doors, or doors not sealed. And so you'll see that that comes from module 13, and you'll actually see that the top 3 minor non-conformances, those cleaning, the dirty facility cleaning records, those type things came in number 2, and then temporary repairs came in as number 3. So those are all from the GMP module, the Good Manufacturing Practices module for food packaging. Number 4, I threw that up there just because that was our first system element that made the top 10 list, and it came in at number 4. And that was either the site not having a management review or not discussing food safety culture during that management review. If you'll remember, those of you that have been around a while, we added food safety culture with edition 9, and discussing during management review the performance of food safety culture was an added requirement. And unfortunately, we still see sites today that have not completely implemented edition 9. They have left out some of those key aspects, and this being one of them. If you've been around me anytime at all, you'll hear me say, read the code. And so you know, that is never more important than when you have a new edition that comes out. Edition 10, we are starting the planning for edition 10. So if you haven't heard, we are looking for volunteers to serve on our working groups. And so yeah, edition 10, it's coming, not tomorrow, not in 2024, but sometime around mid 2025, maybe even 2026 early, you will see edition 10 coming out. It does take us about 1.5 to 2 years to implement a code once we start working on it. So again, not happening tomorrow, but it is around the corner. And then I identified what the top 3 major nonconformances were. And so traceability showed up as number 1, and specifically to things that are specific to food packaging. So regrind, being able to trace regrind as it goes back through the facility, ink, coatings, glue, things like shrink wrap and corrugate also made those top lists. I also included the number of minors that were written for that same element because I think you can see that even though it's the top on the major, it's also pretty significant on the minor list as well. The next one, no internal audit of system elements, 2.5.4.1. We did an analysis of data a couple years ago, and what we identified was that sites that received a major under internal audit, under this element here, scored on average 25 points lower than sites that did not get a nonconformance in internal audit. And those sites that got a minor in internal audit scored on average 5 points lower. So, you know, if you think about it, that makes sense. So internal audit, what's the purpose of it? You know, it's to allow the site to identify their problems, identify those nonconformances before the third-party auditor gets there and identifies it for them. So a strong internal audit system reflects in a stronger performance in the third-party audit. And then number 3 on the list, 2112, that is food safety culture. For those of you that are your numbers person like me and you like to know those element numbers, 2112 is the food safety culture. And some of the nonconformances that were identified there spoke to lack of adequate resources, and that kind of makes sense, right? If a site is not pouring into their facility by making sure that they have enough resources to do the job, then that is identified as poor leadership, poor food safety culture, because food safety culture is about the site leadership leading that initiative. And so lack of resources speaks to that. The backup practitioner with no knowledge of SQF. So obviously that could have been written to 2114 or 2115, which is the 2 elements that's about the practitioner and the backup practitioner. But a lot of auditors felt like that was indicative of a poor food safety culture and chose to write that nonconformance to 2112. So if you're out there and you have a backup practitioner that is name only, we want to make sure that you understand that a practitioner is someone, the backup is someone that needs to be able to have the knowledge of SQF, that needs to have the knowledge of the site, and has the ability to step in when the primary practitioner is not available. And so too many times we see where there's no backup practitioner, or it's someone that has no knowledge of food safety, and it's just on paper they've identified them as the backup. So that speaks to food safety culture. And then those food safety objectives not being established or not known by the interviewees. So it's not enough just to have those food safety objectives, they have to be communicated so that regardless of who the auditor asks about their food safety objectives, everybody should be familiar with the goals that have been established for food safety within the facility, and that they should be able to speak to those. So, so those are our top nonconformances. On the next few slides, I have selected some of these to kind of dive in a little bit deeper and do an evaluation of some of these nonconformances. Okay, so the first one, we're going to talk about the first one first. The one that was the top of the minor list were gaps. Gaps under doors, around doors, doors not sealed properly. And so I've, heard a lot of talk lately about valid nonconformances or non-valid nonconformances. And so I just want to put out my thoughts on that. So valid nonconformance, what does that mean? So when I was looking for a definition of valid, I found one that said supported with objective truth. And as auditors, the truth is that objective evidence. And here at SQFI, we teach that there are 3 ways to collect evidence. We call it the road to Rio. You'll also find it in ISO 19011, that there are 3 ways to collect objective evidence. And Rio stands for records, interviews, and observations. So if you have objective truth or evidence to support a nonconformance, then it's valid. We'll dig into that a little bit more as we go through. But for me, value added is what I'm interested in. So when an auditor writes a nonconformance, does it improve or augment the quality, value, or strength of something? And in this case, the site's food safety system. So is a nonconformance value added? Because it's going to be valid if there's evidence to show that they're not meeting requirements. That's a valid nonconformance. But value added means, is that nonconformance going to improve or augment the site's food safety system? Okay, and some of the things that I want us to consider, I called them my points to ponder for this webinar, is a site's best day is the day the auditor is there. So I used an example of a common nonconformance that we see. It's also a common nonconformance that I hear people saying, well, that's not valid. That's nitpicking. The auditor saw one person not wearing a hairnet correctly, and they wrote a minor nonconformance. So yeah, okay, so we call that nitpicking in some cases, but is it really nitpicking? Because again, my points to ponder. A site's best day is the day the auditor is there. So if I see one person not wearing their hairnet correctly on the site's best day, what does it look like on the site's worst day? What does it look like when the auditor's not there? I came from SQF certified facilities. I was the SQF practitioner, and getting people to wear a hairnet correctly was a challenge. But you know what? I did not look at it like a nitpicking nonconformance when one of my auditors identified it during a GMP audit. I looked at it as an opportunity to make it better, and as an opportunity to resolve an issue that we battled every day. And so I use the hairnet example here to lead into us talking more in depth about gaps under doors, because I hear that all the time. Well, they saw one door that had a gap under it. That's nitpicking. But is it really? Because I also want you to remember this other point to ponder. A minor is a random failure, which by definition, if not corrected, could lead to a system element breakdown, or it could be an indication of a bigger problem. So one person not wearing their hairnet correctly could be that there's a bigger problem of a lack of adherence to all GMPs. So, I like to see auditors where they look at that hairnet not being worn correctly and they dig in a little bit deeper. And so are we looking at all of the GMPs to see if it's a system problem or if it truly is just a random failure? Not wearing a hairnet correctly, is it an indicator of poor food safety culture? The SQF system not being implemented completely, fully implemented. That's part of food safety culture. So is that what I'm seeing? Because again, as an auditor, if I'm seeing that, that's the site's best day. So again, what happens when I'm not there? Also, maybe it's something like an insufficient onboarding problem for new hires. So are we not training people correctly? There's a lot of corrective actions that could be put in place, and you think, really, how do you get people to wear a hairnet correctly? So, you know, we did things like post a mirror by the hairnet rack so that people could see that their hairnet was on properly. So that went a long way to correcting people from not wearing their hairnet correctly. We did visual aids. I tell people I took a safety manager who had really nice hair and did a visual aid of him wearing his hairnet correctly versus all the different ways that we saw people wearing their hairnet incorrectly. And I posted that right above that mirror that I posted next to the hairnet rack. And, you know, if Jack can wear his hairnet correctly, everybody else can. So be like Jack, wear your hairnet correctly. So they knew that person. They were like, okay, I know him. He's wearing his hairnet correctly, so I can do the same. So it doesn't have to be something big and elaborate. Corrective actions don't have to cost a lot of money. Sometimes it's just pointing out the problem and reinforcing the right way to do it. So maybe one person wearing their hairnet incorrectly, maybe it is a training problem. Maybe it is, you know, new hires not being onboarded properly because, you know, some people have never worked in a food facility and they don't understand the why behind wearing a proper hairnet. And, you know, I'd like to see when the auditors dig in deeper and identify, is hair a customer complaint? So is it a problem that is deeper than just one person not wearing a hairnet properly? Okay, so we're going to look at observations and we're going to talk about whether they're valid or value added on the next slide. So I have an example of my gap under the door, and you all know me if you've heard me talk on webinars before. If I'm given an example, it's an actual example. It's something that either happened to me personally or something that I've seen or witnessed, okay? So this is a real example, and I've put the requirement up there for 13.1.4.1. So all external windows, ventilation opens, doors shall be effectively sealed when closed against dust, vermin, and other pests. So we give you the why within the requirement. Here's why the door needs to be effectively sealed. I have an actual auditor evidence statement, and I love this. Dock door A2. So the auditor wrote this. I know exactly which dock door the auditor's talking about. Dock door A2 does not close all the way, leaving a 1-inch gap. So very descriptive. I know the size of the gap, and I know where the gap is at because the auditor said between the floor and bottom of the door. Great descriptive auditor evidence statement. Now, I came from a facility that had something like 38 or 39 dock doors. So if you just told me that a dock door had a gap, it would take me a while to find it, you know, if you didn't point it out to me during the audit. So yeah, you know, being as descriptive as possible is very useful and helpful when sites start their problem-solving process. So be very descriptive, you know, when you're writing your nonconformances. And that applies to your internal audits as well. Be descriptive on your evidence statements. And that will just help improve your corrective action process as well. So is this a valid or a not valid nonconformance? Well, I asked the question, is it supported with objective evidence? Well, the auditor observed a gap, so it's a valid nonconformance. But is it value added or not value added? So is it going to lead to improvement or augment the site's food safety system? And so some of this is on the auditor to make sure that they're looking at the bigger picture to see if there's possibly a bigger problem than just one dock door with a gap under it. But the site also has some responsibility to making this value added as well. A lot of times when something as simple as a dock door with a gap, all we do is make a correction. We fix that dock door. That's it. So both the auditor and the site has some responsibility into making that non-conformance value added. So the root cause that we received from the site was there was no PM, so no preventive maintenance, because the maintenance manager did not have adequate support to assist with the management of the PM and the work order system. And their corrective action, they said they corrected the door that had the gap. So they corrected that one door and created a monthly PM to inspect and repair doors. So is there something that's value added in that corrective and preventative action that was submitted by the site? Well, let's dig a little deeper. Let's look at it a little bit differently. So I'm trying to determine how they got to that root cause, that it wasn't listed on the PM. So I did a sample 5Y, seeing if I could, kind of quickly get to that root cause. And so dock door, when you start a 5Y, your problem statement is always in your first box. So I've just copied and pasted the auditor evidence statement. Dock door A2 does not close all the way, leaving a 1-inch gap between the floor and bottom of the door. So my first Y is related back to the auditor evidence. Why does the door not close all the way? Okay, because it wasn't about the gap. The gap was the symptom. The nonconformance was because the door doesn't close all the way. So why does the door not close all the way? So, when you're brainstorming, you could, here's some typical ones. A seal or a brush issue. Maybe it's, worn or damaged. Could be a mechanical issue. Could be interference. Was there something sitting on the dock leveler that prevented the door from closing all the way? So those are just some examples. I'm going to go with the second one. I'm going to say it was a mechanical issue. Okay. So why was there a mechanical failure? Well, the motor stopped before the closure of the door was complete. All right. So my third why is, well, why did the motor stop before the door completely closed? Well, maybe the chains were not properly greased, so they kind of hung up. All right. Now, I don't know a lot about dock doors. I am not an expert by any means, but I'm trying to follow this logical path to, what I know about dock doors. Obviously, if we were doing a true 5Y, I would want the maintenance guy there. I would want probably the warehouse guy because they know a lot about dock doors. So make sure you're including in this problem-solving process those people that are the experts that know what's going on. Okay, so why were the chains not properly greased? Well, because the dock door chains are not checked. That's not something that we verify to see if they're properly greased. So then why are they not checked? Because they're not included in our PM program. So, okay, so I got to the root cause that the site had gotten to, almost. Notice my root cause is because the dock doors were not included in the PM program. The site said there was no PM because the maintenance manager did not have adequate support to assist with the management of PMs and work orders. Those are two different things, right? So their correction, site corrected the door identified by the auditor. Their corrective action was site created a monthly PM to inspect and repair doors and updated the maintenance job description. And then they did not have anything listed that I would put under preventive action. So here's where we're going to talk about our figurative gap. We're looking at a literal gap, but we're going to talk about a figurative gap. So where's the gap in our thinking between our root cause and our corrective action? So if the root cause is due to lack of adequate support for the entire preventive maintenance and work order system, how did do these corrective actions that were submitted eliminate the possibility of reoccurrence of this nonconformance? For me, it actually calls into question the entire performance maintenance or preventive maintenance program and work order system. So, because we haven't added any support to address our root cause, all we've done is we've added just more work. We've added a new PM. So can you all see the gap there between that root cause and that corrective action? Hopefully you can. And, you know, my goal is try to get sites to, you know, do that process, but then read backwards. So I've got my corrective action. Does it address my root cause? And if the site had read this backwards, they would have said, oh yeah, no, my corrective action did not address the root cause of inadequate support. And so, you know, I ask the question all the time, has that eliminated our possibility of reoccurrence of another, not dock doors, but it could have been anything that we identified needed a PM on it. So very, very crucial to close the gaps between your root cause and your corrective and preventive action. Okay, here's some more examples of root causes that we received for gap under or around doors. So aging of dock plate brushes, and then another one was strip brushes of those docks haven't been replaced for years. Okay, the next one I thought, you know, repetitive use of the dock door causes damage to door seals all the time. And then even the next one, dock door seals easily damaged by normal use. So I've put my points to ponder over here on the right. So they're dock doors. Aren't they meant for repetitive use? We open and close those doors. That's what a dock door does. So they should be designed for it. So maybe we need a better dock door. You know, if I'm taking the one that I've bought a dock door that, you know, gets sold for use in a garage, you know, a home garage, you know, those get opened and closed a couple times a day, right? You know, I leave for work and then I come home from work. So I open and close my garage door a couple times a day. Am I buying that quality of dock door for my commercial use where I'm opening and closing dock doors all the time? So maybe I need a better dock door instead of just saying, it's gonna happen, which is what I say when, yeah, it's repetitive use and it's gonna occur. Also, don't consider damage as normal. You know, dock door seals may wear, you know, brushes may wear. That's normal. Damage is not normal. Damage means something else. That means an extraordinary event happened that caused it to be damaged, because damage is different from wear. So maybe they meant it was just ordinary wear that caused the dock door seal to not be doing its job anymore. So be careful about, you know, how we express those root causes to accurately reflect what we actually mean, okay? The next root cause that we received was not identified during GMP audits or internal audits or during maintenance and cleaning inspections. So my next point to ponder is, why are we relying on inspections and audits to identify our nonconformances? You can't inspect quality in. So if I have a dock door and it has a gap because the seal on it has worn over because of just normal use, and I do my inspection or my PM once a quarter, so I could potentially have up to 90 days worth of a gap in a dock door because I'm trying to inspect quality in. Okay, I'm trying to inspect to identify nonconformances, when in reality what a preventative maintenance program does is we evaluate and say, oh, I see that we're replacing dock door seals, you know, every 60 days. Okay, so now I want to replace those. I want to put in a preventative maintenance, meaning I'm preventing the problem, okay, from occurring. So I want to replace my dock doors maybe at 50 days rather than waiting to failure. So there's a difference in putting in a preventative maintenance program, which is all about inspecting the quality in, versus a true preventative maintenance program where we collect data and we analyze and we change out those parts that wear. That's a much stronger corrective action than just saying, well, we're going to inspect for that. Okay, and we see that a lot. And then the last one, failure on human behavior not to have in a PM. So, okay, well, why are we blaming human behavior here? Okay, we should be looking at why the system allowed it to occur. And we fall short on that a lot. And, you know, I just want to encourage you as sites, whether you're food packaging or just, you know, food in general, you know, to look at going beyond blaming the person for the failure, and look at why the system allowed it to occur and how we can implement some things that will prevent it from happening in the future. So I just always discouraging to see a non-conformance answered with a root cause of it was the person's fault. And then let's look at our temporary repairs. That's another one that we see kind of often, that fascinates me because, I see that marked as NA a lot. And the reason the auditor marks it NA is because temporary repairs aren't allowed. Well, it's not really NA, because temporary repairs, maybe they have a system that says temporary repairs aren't allowed. Okay, well, when you go through the facility and you don't see any temporary repairs, okay, that's compliance to the element. Not applicable because you didn't see any temporary repairs. Because a lot of facilities say we don't allow temporary repairs. But honestly, sometimes temporary repairs are needed. And if you don't allow them on paper, that doesn't mean that your personnel don't find ways to utilize temporary repairs. That one got me in an audit one time. We didn't allow temporary repairs. If we did, we had a system in place where we tagged them, we monitored them, but we're walking through and we're seeing a block of cheese being ground up. And I see the operator pick up a piece of cardboard to stand by the tote where the cheese would fall into it out of the machine. And cheese was falling into the tote, and when asked what is the cardboard for, they were like, oh, well, we found that sometimes cheese fell on the floor, so we're using the cardboard to block the cheese from falling on the floor. Well, that technically was a temporary repair, and the operator had no idea that that's really what that was classified as. They just thought they were doing a great thing by making sure no cheese fell on the floor. So, Murphy's Law, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen when the auditor's there. So, temporary repair. So here's some sample root causes. Operations group that oversees equipment maintenance is somewhat understaffed. Quality GMP walkthrough audits were not picking up this issue. So, we see a lot of non-conformances, a lot of root causes that are related to resources and being understaffed. But the corrective action, that's hard to take action on. So making sure that when we're identifying those root causes, that it is actionable. And possibly if it truly is an understaffed situation, then that needs to be addressed for sure. But perhaps that was better back relating to that food safety culture that we talked about. Again, stop trying to inspect in to identify non-conformances. So, blaming the quality GMP walkthrough, not identifying it, that's really not the root cause on why it occurred. Temporary repairs are sometimes necessary and can be acceptable temporarily as long as they are properly monitored and documented. I agree 100%. That's not the root cause, though, why you had a temporary repair. So as auditors, whether it's an external auditor or an internal, challenge your sites. Why was there a temporary repair? Don't tell me that it's necessary, because I would agree 100% with that statement. And then the third one, masking tape was used on a machine as a temporary repair. So all they've done here is just repeat what the observation was. And they didn't tell me why the masking tape was used as a temporary repair, other than to say that they didn't comply with the policy that said you needed to complete a work order. So I think they were kind of on to something, but they also kind of included some information that was not necessary. So making sure our root causes are clear and concise just helps with the whole corrective action process. Okay. And then I want to look at the sample root causes on not having traceability in place. So traceability in a food packaging facility looks a little bit different than that in a food facility. I have 2 years of working in a food packaging facility, and so traceability looks a little bit different than that. And there are a lot of extra things that you need to be able to trace in a food packaging facility. So some of the things that were mentioned previously, regrind, inks, things like that, that you typically don't think about when you're in a food facility. So traceability just looks a little bit different. And so here I've given some sample root causes, and then I've given the actual CAPAs that were submitted to go with those root causes, and then let's analyze those as our points to ponder. So the first one, the production dates of the products are not recorded. We don't have a computerized system for the shipment of finished products. We do this manual. However, all products that need to be recalled in the event of a problem can be. So what they're saying is basically that the auditor was wrong, that they do have a traceability system in place. It just happens to be manual, not computerized. So they didn't answer because, you know, the auditor identified that they did not have any traceability. So there was a disconnect between what the auditor observed and what the site came back, because basically the site came back and said, yeah, we can trace it. We don't have a problem. So they didn't really address the concerns of the auditor. The CAPA that they included was, before the next audit, we have planned to set up a computerized system. So when I hear that word, we have planned a plan, then that tells me that they did not implement any corrective action, and yet we closed out that non-conformance. So making sure as both external and internal auditors that we close out those non-conformances before we actually close them out, that the site has closed them out, that they've completed those actions. And if it takes more time than the 30 days that SQF allows for the SQF audit, then there is a mechanism in place, and it's called certifying with extension. And as sites, you should be familiar with that and talk to your CB about it. If you have to replace a floor, it's going to take more than 30 days, then ask for that certified with extension. If you're saying I need to update a procedure and it's going to take me 30 days, don't ask for a certified with extension, because a procedure update is not going to be something that would be approved for an extension. Okay. The second one I want to talk about is we received a root cause that said failure to identify a gap in the system through internal auditing process. And then the CAPA was date of production added to stock production labels. This was tied to the date of production of resin lots. When converted to customer order, we'll need both labels visible. Okay, so the site has said the root cause is the internal auditing process. Now, side note, I don't agree with that, because again, as I've said, we're trying to inspect quality in, and that's not what we should be doing. Okay, so making sure that those things, there's not that gap between the root cause and the corrective action. So it sounds like maybe they identified a different root cause because they put in some corrective actions, but there's no connection there between that root cause and that CAPA. So making sure that we do that. And then the third root cause that we got for no traceability is lack of training. Now, I always get a little anxious when I see that identified as a root cause because I always have lots of questions. But the corrective action was employees were trained on 4.1 to record all partial rolls on when they are in use. So then I've got some more questions. So we corrected the current employees. Are there other areas in the facility lacking training? And how about new hires? We did nothing to address when new people were coming in. And so our corrective action fell short. We did a correction. We corrected all the current employees, but we put nothing in the way of a corrective or a preventive action that would guarantee that we're not going to see this same type of nonconformance in the future. Okay. And then I'm going to finish this up with a case study in food safety culture. So we have a site here that received during a recertification audit a major nonconformance to food safety culture. And the evidence statement, that just impressed me so much. The auditor gave a lot of information about why they wrote this major nonconformance to food safety culture. You know, I like to see clear, concise evidence statements, but sometimes you need to give a lot of information to really set the groundwork, especially when you're dealing with something like food safety culture, as to why the evidence supports a major nonconformance. So, you know, while conducting the audit, there were a lot of issues observed. Cleaning, inspections, adequate resources not available. There was some missing documentation that the auditor felt. There was no reference to food safety objectives. When the plant manager was interviewed, he stated the culture was more toward running product instead of the safety of the product. That came from the plant manager. This site received a score low 70s. Just to let you know, they had a lot of nonconformances going on. And so the auditor felt that all of that led to a major nonconformance in food safety culture. So the site's root cause. Yes, you read it right there on the screen, one sentence. Plant failed to enforce a food safety culture. That was their root cause. Their CAPA, they listed 6 items. So number 1, they're going to enforce food safety culture. Okay. Number 2, all of their employees are going to sign their management commitment and responsibility policy. All employees are going to be involved with the monthly GMP audits. They're going to review SQF results with the plant employees. They're going to make their employees watch food safety culture videos. And then the practitioner is responsible for verifying the line checks daily, but they are going to now make the operators and the quality tech responsible for performing those line checks. So they went from, I think the practitioner was actually performing all the checks in addition to everything else the practitioner did. And so they actually shifted some resources. Okay, so my question is, do you think this site implemented enough to meet 2.1.1.2 for food safety culture? There's more to the story. So 6 months later, the site had a surveillance audit, and they got another minor, this time, in food safety culture. And the evidence statement, a different auditor went in and did the surveillance, but corrective actions from the last audit were verified. And they said all employees had signed that responsibility statement. All employees were now participating in those monthly GMP audits. The site had shared audit results with all of the employees. The employees watched those food safety culture videos. However, management commitment is still in question in that multiple items identified during the last audit, so those non-food safety culture nonconformances, had similar findings during this inspection. So while they did everything for the food safety culture nonconformance, they checked the boxes for their corrective action, they didn't fix all the other problems that led to them getting a score in the low 70s. So this site, again, scored in the 70s for their surveillance audit as well. The root cause they gave this time, leadership failed to take the necessary steps to drive a culture of food safety and prioritize those corrective actions for all those other nonconformances. Okay, well, again, you're kind of stating the obvious, because I clearly can see the leadership failed to take those steps. But the question to be answered is why? Why didn't leadership take those steps to drive a food safety culture? And in their CAPA, and again, this is copy and paste, this was their exact CAPA. As the plant manager, I'm personally committed. Now, again, this is the same plant managers that said they prioritized production over food safety. So now that this person's saying I'm personally committed, and that commitment includes closing those gaps, meeting staffing levels, training, complying with GMPs and the SQF code. A food safety culture is a culture that provides the necessary protections and processes. So then this CAPA is actually defining food safety culture for us. So my questions that I've got is, did this site close up the gaps? And are we confident today that when this site has their next audit, that they're not going to get another nonconformance, or that they're going to be able to score higher than in the 70s? Okay, and so the root cause here does not answer the why. So the one last time didn't answer the why. And even though the site implemented all of their corrective actions from last time, it was not enough. Okay, this current root cause doesn't answer why. So I have no confidence that this current CAPA is going to do anything, because it's a commitment statement. It's not actionable items. So as you're addressing those nonconformances, make sure that the root cause makes sense. Make sure that the CAPA has that gap closed between the CAPA and the root cause. And I just encourage you to, look at your nonconformances as opportunities for improvement and close those gaps, both literally and figuratively. And so we are at the end of the presentation, and I think we are ready for questions now. So if Chris is there, I'm going to hand it back to him, and we can kind of chit chat here at the end.
Yeah, thank you so much today, Tammie. Another great presentation. Really enjoyed the points to ponder, just giving, a little bit more detail on the way that, the SQFI sees that when it comes through the technical side. So a couple of questions came in from the audience. Excuse me. The first question takes us all the way back to the first slide and module 13.2.5.1. And nonconformances. It stood out a little bit visually because there were a lot of minor nonconformances, but it was the only one that also had majors. Could you explain a little bit about how those majors are determined, if those were problem minors from the previous audit that were not corrected, or if it was just something that was fundamentally much larger of a problem?
That's a great question, Chris. And we get that question asked a lot, is if you have a repeat nonconformance, does it automatically elevate it to a major, from a minor to a major? And we tell people all the time, the SQF code does not require that. So every nonconformance that is identified is weighed on its own requirement there. So if I for example, the cleaning and sanitation one, the 13.2.5.1. So I'm an auditor, I go into a site, I see that they have a problem with cleaning and sanitation, I write a minor. When I go back a year later, if I have a problem with cleaning and sanitation and I identify a nonconformance, that last nonconformance, it's gone. It's closed out from the year before, and I weigh it on its own merits. So within Part A of the code, there's a definition of minor, there's a definition of major. And so that nonconformance has to meet the level of a minor or a major or a critical based on the definition in Part A. And that definition doesn't include anything about repeat nonconformances. So what I would look for, though, is when a site has repeat nonconformances, why? And I would look for a nonconformance to be written to something else. So is it really cleaning and sanitation that's repeating, or is it corrective and preventative action? So they didn't fully implement their CAPA from the last audit. So maybe it's a nonconformance to cleaning and sanitation this time, but an additional nonconformance to CAPA. And so, or maybe it's food safety culture. We talked about that. So maybe it's cleaning and sanitation. So I've got a repeat nonconformance and it's a minor because it doesn't meet the definition of a major, but maybe I need to look at food safety culture and do I need a nonconformance there as well? So that's what we try to train our auditors to do, is to evaluate the nonconformance, but also see, are there additional gaps that were missed that cause that repeat nonconformance? And so that's a great question. But cleaning and sanitation, that also hits the top of our list for minor nonconformances. It's actually number 1 on the list for food facilities. And so cleaning and sanitation is just, it's just such a broad topic that it's just, you know, we see those random failures, and it's one that I would say we probably see a lot of repeat nonconformances in too, because I may see a cleaning and sanitation problem over here during this audit, and then next time I see a cleaning and sanitation problem somewhere else. So I think we probably see a lot of repeats in there, but we also see such a wide variety. And that's why I didn't really talk about that one in this one, because cleaning and sanitation records, you know, and the auditor's going to evaluate it. And that's why some of those majors came in there, because the definition of a major is it's a breakdown of a system element. So it could be a minor in that I saw something that wasn't clean, or it could be a major in that we didn't have our master sanitation records filled out at all. And so it would then elevate because it's a breakdown in the cleaning and sanitation program itself. So that would be the difference there between those minors and majors.
Really detailed answer. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to bring a question up in relation to this one. It did come from a different slide. And at the time you were discussing the site and their CAPA and really, you know, their whole reasoning was that they didn't agree with the auditor. So I think that brings up a very interesting point. Could you touch on a little bit of the process that the site has that to go through and challenge a nonconformance if they disagree with the auditor's statement?
Absolutely. So I always tell sites that your first opportunity to challenge a nonconformance is during the audit. So if there is something that the auditor brings up, mentions, you know, at the closing meeting, the auditor needs to go through all of those nonconformances. You know, the auditor should be talking to you during the audit, pointing out where they see those nonconformances. At that point, they're not going to tell you whether it's a minor or a major. And a lot of them may not see, oh, that's a nonconformance, but what they'll say is that's an issue, or that's a concern. So you should be noting those as you're going through the audit. And then you should be challenging that at the time it's happening. So, you know, I'm going to bring up this really gross example, but the auditor wrote that they saw mouse droppings on a piece of equipment during the facility inspection. So that's something we talk about right then, because the site came back later and said, oh, we didn't agree with that. It wasn't mouse droppings, it was chocolate shavings from the process, because it was a chocolate process. Okay, that's something we talk about then, because now it's hard to challenge later because you don't have the evidence in front of you. So as you're going through, make sure you're challenging, you know, if there's something you don't agree with, you know, discuss it with the auditor. The auditor should be open to hearing you present it a different way, because sometimes it's all about, it's in the translation, the communication between the operator and the, you know, so making sure that we're talking all those issues out is your first step. Okay. Now, once the auditor leaves the building, There's no more opportunity to challenge with the auditor. You can file a formal appeal with the certification body. So you should have their appeal process either in your contract, written in their terms of agreement, terms of service. It should be on their website. There should be lots of means for you to understand. And I'm sure Perry Johnson, you have it in your contract where it says, here's how you appeal. Here's who you contact. Here's the email address or the phone number. So follow that process. And, and I was a practitioner, and there were times I was like, oh, I probably should appeal that. But then I was like, oh no, I'll just get penalized the next time. It doesn't happen. Please challenge those nonconformances. The CB wants you to challenge those nonconformances and appeal them if they're not right. Because the only way we can get better trained auditors is to identify those issues that are occurring. And then if you're not happy with what Perry Johnson says on your appeal, you can come to SQF. Our appeal process is on our website. There's a form that you fill out. And our responsibility is to make sure that the auditor and the CB applied the code correctly. So in the case of the mouse droppings, I wasn't there. I can't overturn that one because I can't say those weren't mouse droppings. So it's not for me to overturn their observations, but it's to make sure that they applied the code correctly and at the right level. And so we see about a dozen appeals a year. And so it happens. And I encourage sites to definitely use that appeal process if they need to. It's what we're here for.
Fantastic. And then the last question, briefly touched on the Volume 10 working group is sort of being organized and formed. And, we understand we've gone through version updates before that this is still a little bit of a ways out. One of the things that we have seen just recently published from the ISO committee was for some new observations regarding climate change. This is obviously, new to our industry. It's causing a lot of questions and debates in inner circles. Is this something that you see being adopted to SQF in the future in a similar way?
So it is, obviously early in the process, but there are a lot of things when we're writing a new edition of the code that we pull in. So clearly we are benchmarked to GFSI. So GFSI requirements will be coming out, supposed to be by the end of the year. And so once we get those requirements, we will actually look to see if they added something like climate change, which is possible. They may do that. We don't know at this point. We don't have any insider information. Clearly, if they added it, we would definitely add it into the code. But we also look at some of those other factors as well. So ISO, we would look at that. Codex made a change a couple years ago. So we will look at the new codex to see if there are changes that they made that we want to implement into the code. So definitely something that's, on the table as a possibility. But until we get those GFSI requirements and we really, start fashioning that, final code, it'll be hard to tell. But we're looking for people to join. So absolutely. They can do so by emailing technical@sqfi.com, and we'll respond and say, ask a few questions so that we can get you on the right working group. And we would love to have some volunteers for sure.
That's fantastic. Well, again, thank you so much for your time today. It was a wonderful presentation. I encourage anyone that if they have any questions that they didn't get a chance to answer today or ask today, please feel free to reach out either to Perry Johnson, reach out directly to Tammie Van Buren. I know that I use the SQFI website quite a bit in just, my day-to-day. I encourage all of you, if you haven't checked it out lately, there are some new functions, new tools. There's always new articles coming out, white papers. So definitely check that out as well. Again, Tammie, thank you so much for your time today. Enjoy the conference, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.